Joe Budden's co-hosts demand bonuses, and Flip gets upset that Ford signs back with the Joe Budden Network. On the Patreon, Joe Budden and his co-hosts went through a fascinating conversation that broke down kind of where most folks were with their contract. Well, really specifically Melyssa Ford and Flip, which is interesting because they signed at the same time. The episode was called Smooth 30, and I highly suggest you subscribe to the Patreon if you want to see the full length of the conversation. But these were the biggest talking points I took away. Well, it starts off with everyone discussing a bonus for members of the cast. And I think it's interesting because I feel they've largely underperformed this year, so much so that Joe Budden had to call Mark Lamont Hill and JBN to get more folks on the show with interesting topics. And this comes on the heel of him also hiring Imani, who I think took a step back. And there was even a bit of pocket watching with, I think Flip said something about Joe Budden's strip club habits affecting the bonuses that he's able to give out. I don't know though. Flip asking for bonuses is kind of crazy because he's late a lot and I don't think his performance has been that good. The only person who should probably get a bonus is Mark Lamont Hill, and he should get everyone else's bonuses because I don't think Ish was that spectacular. I think Ice, alright, give Ice a bonus. He was better. Give Parks a bonus just because he runs the background. Melyssa Ford, I'm going to say give her a bonus because she has actually led to a lot of the moments, even though it's because of her inability to perform. Like, I was doing a breakdown of the highest moments, the most heated moments on the pod, and Melyssa Ford was up there. So now, Ish too. So give Ish a bonus, give Ice a bonus. Don't give Flip a bonus. He doesn't deserve it, honestly. Then Joe makes an observation about people potting better when Mark's not around. That's interesting because Mark Lamont Hill is someone who I believe saved the pod as it was in the dog days of the summer. He came in, lit it on fire, and even though he's divisive with his political talking points, he's still an adult. He shows up on time. He knows that when the conversation comes to him, he's supposed to talk. In stark contrast to the rest of the cast that seems not to know to be prepared. He also knows how to deal with Joe when he's being in his petty bag. Overall, he's just been a great addition. Then something else happens off camera where Corey talks about Ish and Ice being day twos. Now, this is interesting because it harkens back to the Rory and Mal era of the podcast, where they talked about how Rory and Mal were day ones. Now, obviously, Joe Budden would rebut that with comments saying that you guys aren't day ones, I see the days differently. And Corey saying that Ish and Ice are day twos reveals in jest what the truth is. Ish and Ice weren't part of the building of this podcast, so that's how they're seen. And then Joe Budden drops a bombshell, hinting that Melyssa Ford has re-upped her contract with the Joe Budden Network. And it's a lot of jokes, but Flip looks really perturbed, as I believe when they first started, Flip and Melyssa Ford used to share a lot about their contract. But as time went on, the Cameron thing, him making Melyssa Ford walk off set by calling her fake and phony, it led to a division between them. And I kind of think now that they just operate as co-workers more so than brothers and sisters, which Flip liked to sell in the beginning. And then Flip says he hasn't gotten an extension yet and jokes about heading to AMP. Though I don't think AMP really needs Flip. I mean, has he been on their stream? I think he's been on Kai's stream when he came to New York, but he ain't getting flown out to his palace or to the content house. When I see that, that's when I know Flip is under the AMP umbrella, but he's not. I don't think he's the energy they want. I don't think. It's really a young cast they got over there. They might bring him for a one-off, but that's just an empty threat. After that, Joe says Melyssa Ford lets it be known she loves the Joe Budden podcast in contrast to Flip. Now, that's actually true. Even though it's a narrative, it's actually facts. Melyssa Ford has been on record and said, I love the Joe Budden podcast. If you would have me, I would sign willingly. And Flip, on the other hand, he plays into the narratives about Joe, being someone who wastes money on things, talk about the strip club, talk about the cars, always pocket watching. Interesting. And then Flip reveals that Melyssa Ford was worried about being on the Joe Budden podcast long term. Now, this is fascinating because I think a lot of people wondered, hey, is Melyssa Ford long for the Joe Budden podcast? And now you got to look at Hot and Bothered a little bit differently and think, hey, did she really do that to get some leverage in negotiations? If she did, it was funny because she didn't really gain much due to the performance of the show. Then Flip starts bringing up how he was told everyone was re-signing at the same time in January. And this is a talking point he brought up in the past, and I don't think that's a narrative. I don't think that's COE. He has said it. So Ian's going to him and say, hey, this is the same contract everybody's signing. Everybody's signing up in January, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's all cap. I think Flip is being fed some type of misdirection, or he's being fed information that he's misinterpreting. Very, very interesting. Then Flip starts to give a snapshot of what he believes the cast is getting as far as deals, and Flip reveals that he believes Parks has an infinity deal. That is a link to Parks being the sound guy, being a guy who was there with Joe from day one, in terms of him not leaving Joe's side when everything went left, whether it be Rory and Mal, the Spotify deal, the Patreon deal. He was always down. Then Flip says he wants to conduct business right and wants to stop circumventing Ian to talk to Joe. He says that he realized the errors of his ways because his people talk to him. Manipulation tactic by Flip. He's saying that after 2 years, maybe even close to almost 3 years we're getting on, now he wants to adhere to what the network wants him to do. Straight cap artist, lying for the camera and trying to make it seem like he's grown. He doesn't want to talk to Ian. This is kind of a race card. He said that, he calls Ian the white guy, the white person. I don't want to talk to him. I want to talk to Joe. And now you want to talk to Ian through Joe. The whole time you were talking to Joe through Ian. Ian has been kind of having to play your handler, and I think at some point it's going to get annoying. And I could see Flip just... I think the way they'll show will get rid of Flip is by just lessening his time. Like, oh, you just come once a week. Oh, you just come once every other week. And then, just get the cast used to him not being there. Because he has all the markings of someone who is slowly walking out the door. He shows up to the podcast an hour or so late. He curses out the rest of the cast on a regular basis. And even though he plays the A mic sometimes, at what cost? I don't think he's that dynamic anymore to justify his reckless actions. Joe Budden says he plans to keep the show as is, but Flip says Joe contradicts himself in spaces by saying he plans on making big changes. Now, this is in relation to when he would go on the playback spaces for the JBTV community and said he plans on making changes.
I'm going to work my way to a real rotating cast. That's what I'm going to do.
That's exactly
At some point, I'm gonna let go of the producer reins or add on to that. Like at some point, I'm just gonna add a few as a booker. I'm just gonna add a few pieces and take some of this weight off me and really kind of transition into mogul mode.
Now, Flip got him there. Joe does say stuff on the pod that he contradicts in the spaces. It's pretty obvious that Joe is never really saying the entire truth when he's on camera. Sometimes it does come out, but you really gotta analyze what he's saying and just argue against it across multiple realities. That's kind of what I do on this channel, and then use the comments and use the fan feedback to see maybe what might be happening. After that, Joe says he wants to add one more person, and he starts saying that this person's gonna fly out. This person's gonna be committed. And I think he's talking about Ian Dunlop, only because Ian Dunlop has been on the show multiple times, and it's someone that the cast knows, which to me means that they have a relationship with that person. And Ian has been talking to every member of the show, basically. He's talked to Imani, he's talked to Ice, he's talked to Flip, he's talked to Melyssa Ford. He's really close with Melyssa Ford-ish. I think he'd be texting them. I think he'd be having conversations with them. I think he'd be getting them on the phone and stuff. It's him for sure. I don't see who else it could be that has a dynamic in podcasting and could deliver. And he was on the podcast after. Then Flip asks when Surf is coming home, and Joe says soon. Now, a lot of people have told me that Surf would be a perfect addition to the podcast. While I do think he would be, I don't think Surf has ever demonstrated a professionalism to have the ability to come to the pod twice a week, or show up even once a week. Remember in rap battles, he was always late to rap battles. He wasn't prepared unless it was like those premium rap battles. There was a point where Sue Surf was choking like every battle or no showing certain battles. And I think in time, we're going to have to see if Surf is different when he comes out of incarceration. And if he does come back and he's able to pod, then the Joe Budden podcast might be better than it ever was before. If Flip leaves, who's secretly sandbagging the show with some of his antics, and Surf comes back and he's going full throttle, then we might see a new version of the Joe Budden podcast that could take things to the next level. Like I said before, I think the cast has largely underperformed, with Joe Budden saying at times that, he was going through a rough period in July and it was rough and he wanted it to be over.
Everybody had something to do in July. Flip had just got back from suspension. Maybe when Mel had going on, then Ish takes a vacation, and then maybe like it was a lot happening in July. So it's tough to get a rhythm, especially when the topics go dry. Like when topics go dry, rhythm is gonna. When you don't have the books, you got to make board no matter what, and that's what it is. So, got lives outside of this thing. So, and it'd be a lot going on. So, I got to stop and think about it no matter what's going on in life. Everybody don't have to do that.
Melyssa Ford had some mental health issues that were going on. Then Flip was suspended, and Ish and Ice were taking vacation time. I'm telling you guys, I think Joe Budden, and deep down in his mind, probably thinks this year, even though it might have been profitable, was a step back. I believe the year prior was a stronger year for the Joe Budden Network, and then they regressed this year. But let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure a lot of folks agree, a lot of folks disagree, which is what makes the discourse great. And I want to end this video by saying, please subscribe to the Patreon. There's a lot more content there. It's $3, and it really highlights some of my content talking points in the rest of the Joe Budden universe. I also talk about my upbringing and content creation, and I highlight some of the great space content that it's on Twitter. I know a lot of people don't be on Twitter, or even if they are on Twitter, they don't listen to the spaces. So what I do is I take the spaces and I put them on my Patreon. All right, y'all. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.